It's a very good morning to you. Welcome to the West Ham Voice on Thursday morning. I hope you're all having a pretty decent week. Um, in his first game in charge of West Ham United, Graham Potter against Aston Villa on the 10th of January did something with the team formation and the tactics that caught us all a bit by surprise, but it was a pleasant surprise. And West Ham fans were actually kind of keen to see how this would develop. And that, of course, is when he decided to play Crysencio Summerville on the right side of attack rather than playing on the left that we've all thought he would. Now, Summerville was kind of one of our surprise packages of the summer transfer window. With no advance warning, before we all knew it, he was signing a 5-year deal for West Ham for what looked like a bargain £27 million deal. Now, in his time at Leeds United, Summerville played 49 games for the senior team, scoring 21 goals with 10 assists. However, almost all of those goals and assists came playing on the left-hand side of attack, where he got 19 of those 21 goals and 9 of those 10 assists. His performances for Leeds United in that 23-24 season, where Leeds just missed out on promotion through the playoffs, earned the Players' Player of the Year award for the championship. So when he signed for West Ham United, we got quite excited. You know, here's a young dynamic, up-and-coming player that we've managed to sign. Of course, this was well before we ended up signing some of the other older players, but it was an exciting signing nonetheless. However, it seemed that under Hunan Lopetegui, Summerville had to bide his time to make an impact. Of the 20 Premier League games under the Spaniard, Summerville started in just 7, and despite showing excellent promise and great pace down that left wing, he wasn't afforded a regular starting spot in the team. So by the time Potter took over in January, Summerville had actually only scored 1 goal and 1 assist. So it was encouraging to see Potter putting faith in Summerville in his very first game in charge. And the player paid back that trust by providing the assist for Lucas Paqueta to put us ahead in that game. Unfortunately, however, it was in that game itself that Summerville picked up his injury, which has kept him on the sideline ever since. But it was Potter's intention in that game which gave us an insight into how the head coach wants to play his football at West Ham. High pace and high intensity. And with the current criticism that's being given out to Potter about playing low ball, more like David Moyes, etc., I do wonder just how much of a loss Summerville is to Potter's plans. By the way, if you're new to this channel, if it's the first time that you're watching the West Ham Voice, or if you've watched me before but yet to become a subscriber, please do consider subscribing. Costs nothing to subscribe to the channel. All the content is free. And if you enjoy the content, if you enjoy this video, at the end, please do hit that like button. Now, it was my understanding in that game against Villa that Summerville had picked up a hamstring injury. But of late, there's been mention of a thigh injury. So I'm going to be really honest with you. I'm a little bit confused as to what injury it is. Anyway, on that night in January, Potter played Summerville in a role that was actually quite familiar to him. Throughout his youth career, he's actually played more times on the right side of attack, almost double the number of games, than he has on the left side. And it's only really in his senior career that he's adopted that left side, you know, more or less sort of like being the opposite of what Kudus and Bowen are, where he cuts in from the left side onto his favoured right foot. But in the modern game, to have a natural right-sided, right-footed winger playing on the right side of attack is kind of rare these days. It means that the player can run the flank and cross that ball into the 18-yard box, which is something that neither Bowen or Kudus does naturally. Now, those two left-footed players, of course, are more dangerous when they're cutting in from the right to take a shot on their favoured left. So Potter wanted to adopt a different approach with Summerville, where the player could afford us a very different tactical dimension by playing in that attacking role from the right. So it's such a shame that the player has picked up that injury. And let's be honest, in the first half of that game against Aston Villa in the FA Cup, Summerville was by far one of the better players out on the pitch that night. But alas, since that game, we have been missing his directness, his energy. He's been missing his pace, his forward thinking, and his creativity. Had he not got injured in that game, I really do believe that Summerville would have started more games for West Ham than he had under Potter than he had done under Lopetegui. But now there's confusion over his injury because it's now thought that it's going to keep him out of the team for the rest of the season. Now, if you recall, we did see Summerville back in training at the end of January, so we thought that he was past his injury. It was only a couple of weeks after that game against Villa. However, it is suggested that he actually had a setback during his recovery in training. But again, we only recently saw a video on social media, I think it was on his social media account, where he was training in the gym with a message suggesting that he could be back very soon. So I'm actually now confused because the fact that we're now being told he's going to be out, he could potentially be out for the rest of the season, comes as a bit of a surprise. Now, it was suggested last week that he was offered surgery on his injury, but he turned it down. Now, apparently, had he gone for surgery last week, he would have been out for the rest of the season anyway, recovering. And there is now concern that if he does break down again during his recovery period, he will almost certainly have to go and have surgery on this injury. But this time, not only might the timeline being delayed because he didn't accept surgery last week, this time it's suggested that not only might he miss the rest of the season, if he has to have surgery later on this season, he could also miss the beginning of next season as well. I guess we're going to hear a little bit more and a little bit more clarification on exactly what's going on would be good because there's confusion over what injury he's got. Is it still the hamstring or is it a thigh injury? And there's confusion over the timelines. You know, last week he turned down an offer for surgery, might have kept him out for the rest of the season. Now, with a week gone, if he has to have surgery, he will almost definitely be out and maybe even miss the beginning of next season as well. Graham Potter has actually had it tough with injuries since his arrival at the club. But now it looks as if Summerville is the only player still sidelined. Last week, we saw the return to training of Vladimir Coufal, Nicholas Füllkrug, and Lucas Paqueta. But it was only Paqueta who was picked in the matchday squad to face Newcastle, whereas we all know he got game time from the bench in the second half. Whereas the other two players were not quite ready to be selected either in the team or on the bench. However, it is suggested that both Coufal and Füllkrug should be in the matchday squad for the game against Everton this coming weekend. Now, Paqueta will be hoping to actually start against Everton, and I dare say that both Coufal and Füllkrug will be pushing probably for a place on the bench more than anything else. Now, but ironically, going back to Summerville, I think it is Summerville who could be the biggest loss to Potter because the one thing we know we lack in this team is pace. And the one thing that we know that Summerville has in abundance is pace. Maybe now with Summerville's setback, we might now get to see a little bit more of Luis Guilherme. Now, we were told during the transfer window that Graham Potter put a stop to a potential transfer of Guilherme going back to Brazil. Apparently, the offer was made to more or less pay what we had paid for him, so we would have made our money back. But Potter put a stop to that. And I do wonder whether it's because he now knows that Summerville could be out for an extended period of time. And maybe, just maybe, we might finally get to see what Guilherme can offer to this team.